Hello, everyone. Welcome. As we have participants trickling in, we'll take a moment till we get started, but thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to have a large group today. I'm very excited. I see that participants number climbing.
Boy, it jumped fast.
I know. All righty. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Katie Luger, and on behalf of the NASW-Indiana chapter as the board president-elect, I welcome you to this session on self-care and the NASW Code of Ethics. What is self-care and why is it important? This session will run from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. To ensure this session isn't interrupted, the virtual room will be locked 15 minutes after the session begins. A copy of the presentation as well as any handouts are available on the main conference webpage, and you can download a copy as the session starts. Just make sure you don't close this window. To receive continuing education credit, you must be present for the majority of the session as recorded by the virtual platform and complete a session evaluation by close of business day on October 3rd. Please share your questions in the question box at the bottom of your screen, and you can use the chat box for comments. That will help the moderators be able to make sure we're not missing any of your questions. We will do our best to answer all questions during the session. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to the speakers for this session, Lynn Shaw and Beryl Cohen.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you all for joining us for the conference and for this final session. For those of you who don't know me by now, which you should, but if you don't, my name is Beryl Cohen. I'm the Executive Director of NASW-Indiana. Thank you all for joining us. It's been a long 2 days with lots of really good information and probably a little overwhelming at times. So what we would like to make sure that you do during the next hour and a half is take a deep breath, relax, and be present with us as we talk about self-care, why it was added to the Code of Ethics, what self-care is and can be. This is going to be interactive. It's really, there are some slides that we're going to share. We have a couple of polls. And so we just want to give you all opportunities to share your ideas and thoughts in the chat, as well as answer questions as we go. And I just want to say, Lynn, I really appreciate you doing this with me. Lynn is actually officially on sabbatical right now, but she's got a large resume full of doing work around mindfulness. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be with us and be part of this today. And I can't promise you all that this is be perfect, but you will learn a lot So just to give you all a quick overview, I'm gonna walk through the changes and rationale for adding self-care into the Code of Ethics. For those of you who were in the ethics session I did yesterday, I did some of this, but we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. We'll define personal and professional self-care, the importance of professional and personal self-care. We'll talk about some of the ethical challenges of engaging in self-care and brainstorm ways to overcome those challenges and ways you can engage in self-care personally and professionally. And again, we'll have interactive activities. I promise it's not just going to be listening to the two of us talk. And with that, I am actually going to stop sharing, and it's my pleasure and honor to be doing this with Lynn. We have done these in the past, the two of us, and so I'm happy to be doing this again with you, Lynn.
Thanks, Beryl. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to you, your staff, the interns, the committee, the conference chairs, your moderators, I mean, Matchbox, the whole gamut that pulled off a 2-day virtual conference. So yay. And if anyone wants to use your reaction buttons in the bottom, that is just perfectly fine. And I really appreciate your asking me to participate with you. It's always fun. I will say that when Beryl and I get together, even though we have an outline, well, some things just start to happen. But we are really happy to be here. And Beryl had asked me to kind of share with you why I'm on sabbatical, a little bit about my past learnings and where I am with social work. So I am on faculty at the University of Indianapolis in the Phyllis Landlin Department of Social Work. And my role there is twofold. I am an associate professor, tenured, and I also am the MSW field director. And so last year, I was in one of those spaces of, well, I just am tired. Okay, we have been a lot of that conversation over the last 2 days in the chat boxes. And I was reminded by my husband, who said, I thought you were going to take a sabbatical next year. I go, what? I did? I'd forgotten. And so to do a sabbatical, you actually have to submit a proposal. It goes through committee process, and then everybody has to agree, like your dean and your program director, and then your team has to cover you. So I am very grateful to my team, my program director, my dean, the provost, and the board of trustees who said, yes, goodbye for 4 months. And so I began my sabbatical at the beginning of the semester officially. So I've had almost 1 month to embrace it. And let me tell you, it was interesting, to say the least, to try to keep a foot out of working and actually engage in what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is I decided to do a deep dive into mindfulness training. And I signed up for a 9-month certificate in mindfulness and psychotherapy. So I am a licensed clinical social worker, also with the LCAC, and I have a doctorate in education in the major of adult education, community, and higher education. So when I decided to do this deep dive, I found this program is called the Mindfulness Certificate in Psychotherapy, and it's through the Institute for Meditation and Psychotherapy. And we had a 6-day retreat on Zoom 3 weeks ago, and now we've started in our weekly classes, and it is really fascinating. I am back in grad school. I mean, I feel like I'm a doctorate degree student again, and being taught by psychologists and social workers and psychiatrists, many of whom are connected to the Harvard Medical School Department of Psychology. And the reason I bring this up is because when we're going to talk later about professional self-care, this is part of my professional self-care. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've been learning. My background is in mental health, addictions, education, professional development training. I've been a consultant. So I've, like Beryl, we've been around a little while. And in that being around a little while, I've had a very diverse CV, which has also lent itself to, I think, an aspect of self-care and being able to diversify. As a result, I realized that a few years ago, I was really being drawn back to studying mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, which are not the same thing, and how to perhaps use that as a tool with my students, because as the field director, I'm working with social workers in the community, as well as the students who are predominantly, I'm working with the master's students. So I started just taking trainings and finding things online, expanding my library, attending so many things virtually that I could. And so over the past 4 or 5 years, this has just been one of my heart studies, I will say. So I study critical self-reflection, self-care, and mindfulness, and now creativity and play. So in saying that, as a grad student with my MSW degree, I was placed in an inpatient substance abuse and mental health center, where I actually was kept and became my employment right after my practicum. And that was where I was introduced to the formal practice of mindfulness. Now, as a student, I will say I didn't totally embrace all the teachings because I just wanted done. I just went out. I just went, let's get done. But I also was able to observe and rotate through all the programs offered at this treatment center and see the ways the different staff utilized mindfulness in treatment, especially within our patient load with psychiatric disorders. So I would, I'm always happy to talk about this topic. So what we're going to do today is give you and me a chance to share a little bit about our diversity of work and also of times that we've had hit the wall, and also open it up to our participants. And I really appreciate that people are logged in for this final session. And whether you are trying to multitask right now, that is your choice. I strongly encourage you to kind of hang in with us. And I also want to give you and invite you to just this time with us so that you can play on our playground. And one of the other things that I specialize in is laughter yoga and therapeutic laughter. And so I've been doing that work for about 25 years. I utilize laughter therapy as a psychotherapist. Have anecdotal stories around that. Had I known I was going to be into college higher ed teaching, I probably would have officially done some research study. But at the time I was a clinical social worker and I was just like, okay, let's just have some fun. And that's what I like to do, is I like to have fun with my work. And I also know what it's like to not have fun. And so we'll be sharing a little bit about that now. What I'd like you to do now is just to enjoy a mindful presence of coming together to this moment. But we have been on Zoom for 2 days. If you've been attending both days, we have done the take a deep breath and exhale, which is very important. Actually, your breath is what the free tool you have is a breath. You don't have to pay any extra for that. You've got it. And I would love for you to just stand up. Stand up if you can. Now, if you're driving, please stay seated. Okay, eyes on the road. Okay. If you're called in and you're in a setting where you can't stand up, to worry about it. If you're somehow seeing a client while you're doing this, that would be really tricky. But standing up and just do the shakes. You just start shaking. You just start shaking and you move and you get your body warmed up and you get active and you just stretch and stretch. And believe it or not, this is a mindful shakedown. And it's just up and down and up and down and all around and kick. Woo! Roll those shoulders, get back. Now, when you're ready, now hang on to that feeling that you have right now, because hopefully you've energized your body and your mind and waking up your soul. And here we go. Back to you, Beryl.
Thanks, Lynn. My headset, which should be fully charged, just told me the battery's low. So we're going to try to make sure that I don't think it'll, I do have a backup. So if I fade out, somebody just tell me and it'll take me a minute to get them switched over, but I can switch. I am going to go back to the PowerPoint.
And while you're doing that, let me just say that if you want everyone in the chat to see what you're writing, you'll need to do the drop-down menu and select everyone.
True. So we're going to talk about the overview of the changes and the rationale for those changes around self-care that went into effect June 1st, 2021. Somebody had asked me yesterday about how to get the new, how to order them. You can order them through the NASW Press, through our national website, socialworkers.org. I also just updated things on our store, our virtual store. And so you can order them through us. If you order them in the next 24 hours, please know that we will be closed tomorrow for my self-care day, but we will get them to you early next week and we can get them in the mail to you. But we do have copies here. So let's just jump into why we did this. There are places in the code where you could say self-care is. So things like not practicing while we're impaired, right? So if we're practicing good self-care, then we're not maybe self-medicating with alcohol or another drug. And so that is self-care, right? So we have all kinds of ways that we've done it, but this is the first time that we actually have explicitly listed self-care into the Code of Ethics. And we really did it to recognize the high levels of stress that we all face, especially in the last 18 to 19 months with COVID. I mean, it's made life, if this is where we all were and as general population, we are now all here because of COVID and all of those stresses. And then you add in the work, it becomes even more stressful. And so to really try and recognize those factors and recognize the importance of establishing professional and personal self-care, to promote it as a best practice, as an ethical imperative, and again, to prevent professional impairment, harming clients and reducing ethical infractions. And so it's really about helping all of us, not as a negative in any way. So we added it into a number of places. We added it in to number 5 in the purpose section. So what's highlighted is what was added. So we added in language that says that we encourage all social workers to engage in self-care, ongoing education, and other activities to ensure their commitment to those same core features of the profession. So engage in self-care, ongoing education, personal and professional self-care. We also added it to the integrity section. So under social workers behave in a trustworthy manner, so that we should take measures to care for ourselves professionally and personally, because that's how we ethically can be the best provider of services that we can be, right? When we're doing therapy. And I just, oh, there it is. And then we added this section into the end of the purpose section. Sorry, I put the slides in the wrong order. So we added this section in, and I don't typically read, but I want to read this just to make sure that you all can really hear it. So professional self-care is paramount for competent and ethical social work practice. Professional demands, challenging workplace climates, and exposure to trauma warrant that social workers maintain personal and professional health, safety, and integrity. Social work organizations, agencies, and educational institutions are encouraged to promote organizational policies, practices, and materials to support social workers' self-care. So the first part calls on us to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. The second part is a tool to help that we can use to help our employers who may not be social workers see why self-care is important and support that need for us as self-care. The changes are made and they've been put into the Code of Ethics really and truly as guidance. So for those of you who don't know what a Code of Ethics, this is what the new book looks like, right? So the first section is we have the purpose of the Code of Ethics, and then we get into the ethical principles, and then we get into the ethical standards. Whoops, there we go. The ethical standards. We did not put this into the ethical standards. It's in the kind of preamble section because we don't want it to be used as a tool for filing ethical complaints. So if somebody's working impaired, and part of the problem is that they're not taking care of themselves, there's a complaint filed about them working impaired, not because they're not doing self-care, right? Because my idea of self-care is different from Lynn's, is different from all 240 of you that are in this room with us, right? Everybody has their own idea of self-care. And so we didn't want it to be used as a tool to file ethics complaints. And we didn't want a licensing board to have to make that determination of, well, you say it's self-care, but I don't. We didn't want those things to happen. We wanted it to be used as a tool to help us in getting self-care and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves both personally and professionally. So do we have any questions, Katie? I don't know if there are any questions, or if you guys have any questions about kind of that first section around why we added it and where it's been put. Go ahead and type them in. And if not, we can move on to the next.
There was one quick comment that they would love more information on the course you're taking, Lynn. And I think just more about your experience with therapeutic laughter.
I'm happy to add that to the chat so that people can, find that information. Just real briefly, it's the Institute for Meditation and Psychotherapy. And I'll also add more information of websites people can go to for laughter therapy. for the training in laughter yoga in particular. So, and I'll perhaps, Beryl, I think later in this session, I can address that a little more deeply.
Yep, we can do that.
Okay.
Do that. So I got a note that Patricia, you have your hand up. Do you have a question that you want to type in, or was it a mistake? Because sometimes we raise our hands and don't mean to. And I did mean me. Sometimes I raise my hand inadvertently in a session, not any of you.
And we do have another question that came in. Was this a consideration for addition to the Code of Ethics before COVID, or was it prompted heavily by COVID? I was curious how long this has been in the works.
So we had discussions in the past about it. So the last big change that we made to the Code of Ethics was at the Delegate Assembly in 2017. So Delegate Assembly is NASW's decision-making body. And so in 2017, we had been working on a number of changes. They were voted on in 2017. And this came up a little bit, but not a lot. And a lot of those changes in the 2017 that went into effect January 1 of 2018 really had to do with technology and the use of technology in practice, as well as updating language. And so after that, there were some discussions about do we, don't we? And then honestly, Delegate Assembly, we ended up doing 2 separate days. We usually do Delegate Assembly in one day where there's the discussion and debating about things, and the structuring of words and those kinds of changes all get done before the actual Delegate Assembly where we vote on those changes. And we came to vote and there was a lot of discussion about where to put the Code of Ethics, self-care into the Code of Ethics. Because I think there were some people who really thought it should be a standard to make sure that it happens. But it's not, but then the decision was that in order to not have it used as a weapon against people, we wanted to make sure that we didn't put it in where you couldn't be dinged on specifically not practicing self-care. Again, my self-care today, when we get done with the conference, is going to be that I'm just moving everything back into our office and I'm going to go home. On a typical day, I would make sure I had my to-do list for tomorrow ready so that when I come into the office the next day, I already know what I need to do. That's self-care for me, even if it means staying a little bit later. Somebody else may say, I want to go home at 5 o'clock when my time's up, and then I'll come in the morning and do my notes, and you shouldn't stay late, right? So I could get judged for staying an extra 15, 20 minutes to finish something or put together that list. And so we really need to think about those pieces. And so that's kind of where we ended up. It has been a discussion for a while. I think part of our logic was also that, and when I say I'm talking about NASW as an association and how we make decisions about these things, not just me or me and Lynn. But it was basically covered in other pieces of the code. It just isn't as explicitly stated as it is now. So, so at this point, I think we got all of the questions. Oh, there's a question, was I involved in making this update? So as a executive director, I do not have a vote in Delegate Assembly, but anybody who is a member of NASW has the opportunity to comment on changes to things that are happening, and you can be part of those panels. And if you want more information about Delegate Assembly and how that process works, shoot me an email at info.naswin@socialworkers.org, which you all should know by now because I keep throwing it out there. But send it to our general email and I will get you the information. But it's a neat process, and I have been a delegate in the past. It's a really neat process for making changes. So I think, Lynn, at this point we are at our first polling question. Oh, whoops, did I miss something?
Beryl, I think someone had their hand up. Shirley has their hand up.
So if you have a question, if you could type it in the chat, and we'll unmute you guys for questions a little bit later in the process. We just want to get through just a few basics first. So if you could hold on those unless they're really important. And if they're really important, type them in the chat and we'll get to you. Nina, could you go ahead and start our first poll, please? So the question is, my personal self-care practice is, and please remember, we cannot see your responses. It's all aggregate. We don't know who's saying what. So be honest, we're not going to come after you if you say it's non-existent. I promise we won't come after you. Nobody will know it's you. And Nina, I have no idea how many people have responded. So when we get to like, I don't know, 60, 70%, about 35, 40 seconds, we can go ahead and show the results. Good.
Cool.
Good.
Okay.
I'm working on improving my use of self-care. That's where the majority of people are. And I think that that's where a lot of us are. Those of you who it's going really well, kudos, big round of applause. Seriously, it's hard. It's really hard to find a good, to do it well, I think. I don't know, Glenn, what do you think?
I think that that's part of our interest today, is to hear from those who are doing well, and they can offer their suggestions and also help us explore some of the things that we can do on improving our use of self-care. I also think it's interesting that, that happens occasionally when I remember. Yeah, so this poll is being taken today. It's kind of like when you fill out those personality inventory things. It's like, if you're really angry at the moment you take them out, you're going to show up angry. It's like, maybe you should wait a few days and then see what that actually means. And so, a week from now, you could answer this poll question maybe differently. But I really like the aggregate of looking at how many people are invested in the concept and the practice, because we can look at it from a concept perspective, but we also look at it from a practice perspective. So yes, it's definitely challenging to meet all 9 essentials of wellness every single day. And so I think that, when I was treating clients for depression and anxiety, particularly the mood disorders, our measurement was not 100% of, success every day. Our measurement was 5 out of 7 days a week I felt like getting out of bed. And then it progressed to 5 out of 7 days a week I'm eating, 5 out of 7 days a week I'm engaging in some type of activity. So I'm going to work, so I think it's interesting to take a look at how our personal self-care measures up. So we've got some comments in the chat. Do we want to take a look at those?
Yeah. I'm going to let you do that for a second while I switch my headset. Is that okay?
Perfect. So
right.
Let me get up a little higher here. So, okay, I actually schedule into my calendar so I can be sure to include myself in my life events or activities. That's actually a time management technique that's often promoted. Make a date with yourself, so to speak, and keep that appointment, that accountability that goes into there. Doing really well because I'm retired. It is really hard, but ever so important. It's a daily choice to care for myself. If I don't care for myself, no one will be doing it for me. Amen to that. I schedule into my calendar too, and I'm retired. Hey, retirement brings some interesting aspects. I used to counsel people who were moving into retirement, and in particular, some people who retired but did not emotionally prepared for retirement. And so looking financially was fine, but emotionally, no. So I really appreciate that you're still taking care of that importance. It's really hard, but ever so important. It's a daily choice. Got that one. All right. I schedule into my calendar. Okay, let me get further down. We got some more messages here. This is great. I'm so trying to do more self-care. I have accomplished one thing personally, and that is going to bed to get at least 8 hours a night. Looking forward to a vacation, but no plans yet. I tried this summer, but passport's not come in time. I have not been on vacation since 2014. I have a colleague who works inpatient, and she has more days of PTO than there are days in the year. And she finally made herself take time off this year and has scheduled some things. One of the things I personally like to do is I will book an Airbnb for myself. And I just did that last week and just got back from a 5 days personal retreat as part of my sabbatical. So, but I do that even when I'm not on sabbatical. Wellness is lifestyle. Yes. Okay, let's move down to going well since I was diagnosed with cancer. That made me change my priorities in life. I'm so happy that you're here with us. And it definitely, when we have a life-altering situation occur, a life-impacting, I should say, and it definitely helps us to take a look at what's important. Self-care to me is to consider, what do I need today for my personal or professional well-being? It is written in my planner each week. Boy, this is really awesome that you guys are already on this. No problem. My motto is that I'm working towards my next vacation. If I have designated time for self-care, I do better at practicing self-care. Our employer gave us free access to the Calm app, which is fantastic. Yes, it is. I personally use Insight app. Love it as well. Headspace is another one. It helped me to be able to take a break and reassess. It was hard to stick with daily walks, exercise, but after enough time, it feels like a necessity, a habit. I work out during lunch hour most days, slowed down with an injury, but finding new ways to work out. There's that creativity. Self-care is a process. Pray, exercise, eat healthy, have fun with your favorite person. And so as we have like 20 more new messages, so I'm going to scroll down here, and make sure you're checking the chat and reading through what your colleagues are saying. You know, I didn't even tell what my topic that I'm studying for this mindfulness certificate. My topic I chose for my sabbatical and proposed was on psychological well-being through the lens of mirth and mindfulness. And so I blended my two passions, if you will, of laughter, humor, play, and mirth is the emotion of humor, with mindfulness and mindfulness practices. So I have been because I ended up not traveling for this time period. I am just kind of going with what flows in. And one of the things that flowed in was talking to other people who may have some thoughts around psychological well-being. So I actually contacted my former dean. Her name is Dr. Anita Thomas. She is now provost at the St. Catherine University in Minnesota, which they also have a social work program there. So last month, she and I had a conversation, and I said, so what would be your definition of psychological well-being? And she said, prior to COVID, it would have been that it's descriptive, that I could talk about it, tell about, what psychological well-being is. And by the way, she is a counseling psychologist by training. And she said, but now it's a process, as someone already mentioned in the chat. It's a process. And she goes, it's unfolding. And she goes, what I really think I need to do some days is take a sign and take it out to the corner of the street and just say, we will breathe through this together. And I loved it. And I said, can I use that? Can I use that quote, please, 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 please? And she went, of course you can. So we will breathe through this together. And so taking a look at our personal self-care, as many of you are mentioning in the chat, it is not just one element. It is not just one breath, but it is one breath at a time. So Beryl, what do you want to say about that?
Oh, sorry about that. Apparently, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I can.
My fancy dancy Bluetooth headphone doesn't work either, so I'm back to the old-fashioned. Oops. Oh no! There we go. Come on.
I want to mention while you're doing that, Kristen writes that her work is. Whoops! Where my chat went away.
Oh,
she wrote
sorry.
that they do. That's okay. They do personal development plans, and their employers encourage that, and then they meet one-on-one once a month to review their personal development plan. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, no kidding. That is like fabulous. And it's one of the things I think that, for those of you who don't have that in your, at your workplace, it's a tool. Again, this is a tool to use to help you get those things. And I apologize for the sound issues. I guess after 2 days of talking on this on my headset, I finally killed it. But so we will move on. There was one other question about, I'm someone who really struggles with not feeling productive. Any advice on how to address this feeling like I'm not productive when I take time away from work? And I think we will get to that as we move through the rest of this presentation. But it's a good question. So our next slide, if I can make sure everything works. So when you think about personal self-care, it's about, again, promoting our personal well-being, right? To prevent and or treat illnesses and promoting wellness and well-being. And we already did this. How do you practice personal self-care? While I was trying to get myself reconnected so you could hear me. Lynn, do you have a practice you want to do, or did I miss that? I don't think I did.
No, excuse me. So Linda asked what screen is supposed to be up right now, and that is the slide personal self-care. So many of you on this call may use mindfulness practices in your programs or with your clients or patients or residents. So let me just do a brief intro. So mindfulness is interestingly designed or described or defined depending upon what modality you're kind of looking at. For example, if you have taken the mindfulness-based stress reduction class, which I have, by the way, last year, there is a Center for Mindfulness here in town. Dr. Kathy Kuhn is the founder and teacher, and I trained with her last year. And it was then I really began to understand incorporating mind, body, spirit, not the first time ever, of course, but from a mindfulness perspective. And looking at the definition of mindfulness is that it's being present without judgment. And that's, I think, the hard part for our minds, is because we have been trained to make judgments, we have to make sometimes very quick decisions. But I'm talking about being able to experience your life, experience your world from that place of non-judgment. And as I was participating in yesterday's sessions, particularly the imposter syndrome session, as well as today's session on self-care, and the clinical supervision session as well, it was interesting that as a lot of the chat was around judgment and how harsh we can be on ourselves. And one of the things that I think is important is that we treat ourselves as if we were treating someone we highly value. So if you think of a person right now that could come to mind that you highly value, it could be anyone. It could be a pet. It could be a tree that you really, really value. If you watch the Olympics and they introduce forest bathing to the viewing audience, we look at it as walking in nature and being surrounded and protected, and we value our nature. So just wrap that part of you right now in that value. And then think, when you go home at night after work, or if you work evenings and you go home in the day, whenever you reach your place, when you walk in and start to take your work clothes off and put on perhaps some more relaxing clothes, do you take those clothes off hurriedly, just get out of this and do this? Or do you just, you know what, I'm just gonna, as if I'm taking the clothes off my most valued person, and just really appreciate me. This was a hard day, or this was a great day, or this was a marginal day. My son, when he was in grade school, particularly in kindergarten and first grade, he measured his day by low, medium, high. I have no idea where he came up with this, but he'd come home and I say, how was your day? Medium. I go, what made it medium? He goes, I only got 2 hugs instead of 12. That's because his grandmother told him he needed 12 hugs a day in order to be well. I was like, thanks, mother. So we would start to hug him then, so he would get his quota. All right. So interestingly, my focus here is that same thing. I can assess that, but I don't have to judge me. So in mindfulness, it's just being fully present. And I think that we practice it as much as we can when we're with our clients, because we're listening to them and we're having to assess and intervene and evaluate. And so our listening skills have to be heightened, but sometimes listening is exhausting at times, especially if you're doing it on Zoom or any other virtual capacity. So if you would just think about what that was like just in those few seconds that I asked you to do that, and also what that felt like for you, because now we're going to drop into just a very simple practice of what is called pause, drop in, and breathe. And so this is something that you can do throughout the day several times. It's not just a one size cures all type thing, but just again, going back to the importance of your breath and breathing in the moment. And so you may, if you choose to close your eyes right now, you may. If you don't, just do a nice soft gaze in front of you and just look away from the computer screen if you're on your laptop or your phones. And, just allow yourselves to just kind of, if you would, feel your sit bones underneath you. And if you're standing, then feel your feet on the floor or the ground or wherever you are. And allow yourself then, if you kind of gently close your eyes and then exhale and pause. Inhale, drop in, meaning let yourself move beyond your ears, past your neck, into your solar plexus, your heart space. And breathe in. And when you breathe, allow those lungs to expand without raising your shoulders, without wondering what you look like with your eyes closed, because we can't see you. And allowing your body to respond to your breath. One of your precious gifts you have for yourself is your breath. Pause, drop in, and breathe. Now you've had your eyes closed, you can simply open your eyes a little bit and then wider and wider. And if you had any type of response to that, go ahead and put in the chat just a one word, what that quick pause, drop in, breathe was like for you.
And thank you all for sharing so willingly and openly in chat. It makes this much more enjoyable for Lynn and I too.
I love these responses.
I know.
Relaxed muscles I didn't realize were tense. Good for you. Calm, I feel here. Yes.
Good. Okay, we've been successful. We can end now. We got a bunch more to share with you guys. Thank you guys so much for sharing.
Thank you for that. I have a calming voice. Yeah, my kids don't always think so, but thank you very much. Oh, yes, thank you for that. And before we move on to the next part, I just want to reiterate that what Beryl said in the beginning is that what self-care looks like to me will not look like to you. We may not always share the aspects of self-care. So Beryl, can I take a few moments here and expand on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So the word self-care have been used a lot. Do you all remember when the word passion became the buzzword? I don't know, it was about 15 years ago or so. I lose track of time these days. But passion was, I like the word passion in its true context of just that fulfillment and joy and excitement and energy around it. And then it gets overused. And all of a sudden it was like passion this and passion that and passion this and passion that. And that's where I think self-care gets watered down as well, because it's from a place of inner care, the care of self. So whether we call it self-care, our wellness, our wholeness, someone's using the word empowerment. I'm still allowing for the word passion, of course, but it's also about, thank you, yes, Kathleen just said self-care is a buzz that's been so watered down, especially by so many employers. And yet, right now, you can go on LinkedIn and just pull article after article after article after article from business and education and psychology and environmentalists. Everyone's talking, not everyone, globally, about self-care. Because, as Francine said in her talk, we're tired of being resilient. And yet I think about how we lose the focus and how NASW and the Code of Ethics can now bring us back to that which we should and could have learned more about within our degree programs. You know, we talk a lot about self-care with our students, but sometimes in our department meetings, I went, okay, we've been talking about self-care, but are we practicing it with the students? Are we giving them permission to, practice self-care? There are times I've sent a student home. I said, go home. You don't need to be here right now. You're exhausted. Well, I'll get an unexcused and it'll affect my performance. Blah, blah, and go home. I don't want to see you here until next week. Go rest. And I'm not alone in this. I have very many colleagues who take that perspective with their students. It's like not just one day. It's not like the entire semester. It's just, wow, helping with that. Non-judgment, giving permission. I had like at least 3 students over the past year who wanted to quit. It was tough to do. It's tough to do anything right now when we're 18 months into this pandemic and it's up and down and roller coaster. And what it took was sitting down and saying, what are you doing for yourself? Yes, you're doing your assignments. Yes, you're doing this, but what are you doing for yourself? And student after student after student would say, I know we talk about how important it is, but I don't have enough time to get everything done. And we're going to talk about barriers in a little bit. And so for each one of those students, though, it took pause, drop in, breathe. And I am so happy that I'm going to cry, each student said yes to themselves. They wanted this degree, but they had to get out of the way and allow self to be cared for. When I say out of the way, I mean their mind, thoughts get out of the way, and then let themselves heal, let themselves work it through so that they could graduate. And they did. And it wasn't just one collective conversation. It was one individual conversation. It was a collective process from all the faculty, the peer group, the cohort, and that person that I have in my head right now, my person I'm valuing right now, said yes to herself. And she's so thankful. And she's got a wonderful job right now after her graduation. And she's working towards her LCSW. But look what would happen if we don't just allow for the practice. So I can do mindfulness activities all day long, but if I'm not integrating what I'm learning, if I'm not taking it in that, you know what, if NASW says this is important for the Code of Ethics, then this must be an ethical issue that I may be dealing with. My ethical issue may be I'm not taking care of myself. So if I'm not taking care of myself, how am I showing up to my clients, my colleagues, my family, my friends, my community? That's a lot to ask of us, isn't it? As essential workers. I mean, it really is. I mean, how many of us are still educating people about what we do? because it's social work, right? Now we've been on national attention over the past 18 months. And all of a sudden it's like, we need a social worker in here. I'm like, well, okay, it only took what, how many decades? But we're getting there. We're getting there. So I just really would like to invite you just today and during the next half hour that we have to really value you. And when you go home today, or if you are at home, and I hope if you are watching from home that you've got your best pajama pants on, man. You know, I do.
I don't, but that's okay.
Yeah. So I just felt such a need for us to remember that self-care is more than two words put together with a hyphen. It is a process, as someone said. I agree with that. It is a place for us to be every single day consciously allowing ourselves to be of value so that we can bring that value to others as we are called. Whether you're an administrator, a program director, whether you're out on doing the work in the community where you're working with people who are homeless right now, you're the ones walking at midnight, or you may be on a mobile, process that you get to go out to the streets and bring mobile services. Maybe you're working with the police and you're able to be that social worker that's working with them. So I really, really want us to continue this conversation on a different level. And I think we're ready to segue to professional self-care.
We are. And so for all of you listening out there, what Lynn just did and what she just said is part of why when I thought about doing this session, I called her and said, would you do this with me? Because she does it so well. So thank you, Lynn. We are now going to jump into our second polling question. Nina, if you would please pull that up. So the second one is, my professional self-care practice is non-existent, happens occasionally. My employer is supportive, but I'm not comfortable taking advantage of the opportunities. Going well, my employer values professional self-care, or going really well, my employer values self-care and encourages us to take opportunities. And again, we cannot see your responses, so please be honest. Be as honest as you'd like to be. And when we get to about 60 or 70% or 30, 45 seconds, you can go ahead and close this down and show us the results, please.
All righty.
Interesting.
Yes, we have some close numbers here. I hope everyone can see the poll results.
So I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised. I mean, I'm sorry for the 10 of you who say it's non-existent because your employer frowns on it, but I really was concerned that that would be much higher. And so that really is a place where this can be a really handy tool to have that conversation with your direct supervisor about self-care and what does it mean and why it's important. And yes, I agree. I've had conversations with other folks about requiring self-care sessions, and because again, my idea of self-care is not the same as yours. We have multiple sessions at the conference because some of you are interested in one thing and others in another. And so your professional self-care of learning new skills, you need to be able to make some of those decisions and not make it be a group. And sometimes I think we spend a little too much time sometimes with our peers at work, and it's nice to be able to do some of that self-care either personally or professionally outside of your work environment, or with different people so you can learn new things. Lynn, do you have thoughts?
No, I'm just looking through, I mean, of course, I always have thoughts.
The chat.
Looking through the chat, and I'm reading how it seems that there's been some improvement. So I think our poll reflects that. Why don't we go on to the next slide?
We can do that. So professional self-care, really it's about supporting our professional self so that, again, we are learning the skills we need. We can be competent in our work. We can practice ethically. And you all are already sharing in the chat kind of some of the things that you do as practicing professional self-care. And again, it really is, it's whatever you feel it would be for yourself. And it's different for everybody. And it's nice to see that there are some places that are really encouraging it. And a few of you have in here throughout the session have said things about, feeling guilty, taking time off when we're short staffed, those kinds of things. And it is hard. I mean, at NASW, we're an office of 2 with student interns. It's sometimes hard to say, you know what, it's Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, my brain isn't working anymore. It's time to just be done. And that's okay. Sometimes we just have to be able to walk away, even for a couple hours, to come back and be more refreshed and more able to do our jobs. So Lynn, do we have another practice that we want to do, or do you want to just keep moving through the challenges, the opportunities and challenges?
Let me say a couple of things about professional self-care. So when we talk about professional self-care, when Beryl and I were putting this together, we had conversations around what that really means, and versus personal self-care. And so professional self-care is the edification of you as a professional. We are in a professional, we are in a profession, and we are, let me give you an example. So I see a chiropractor. He's a wonderful, wonderful person that keeps me balanced, keeps me going. And he was sharing with me how when he turns in his reports to insurance companies, for example, where maybe there's been an auto accident and he's treating someone for an auto accident, he said that he's at the low part of the totem pole. He said, they won't listen to me. I said, what do you mean they won't listen to you? Chiropractic care is actually, most insurance plans now cover chiropractic care. And he goes, well, you got the medical doctor, and you got nurse practitioner and physician assistant and specialist, and then maybe me. Yet that person, the chiropractor, is the one that has seen the patient the most often. I'm getting tired too. Has seen patients more often than the other practitioners. And so I was like, wow, it's kind of like social work, where sometimes we might feel like we're at the bottom of the pole with all the other disciplines that are working with a client. And yet we're the ones that might be seeing that client more often. So in order for us to continue to support our profession, and in order for our profession to be recognized as so, then our professional development is important. You're here, you're at this conference. This is professional self-care. Being able to not just land in a session on self-care, but to take my goodness, we had some wonderful presentations this conference, related to so many different aspects of our work. One of the chat comments yesterday a person made was, wow, there's so much that we can do with our degree. Yes, there is. And we can professionally grow. I mean, just look at the number of certificates or certifications. Thank you. Certifications and certificates or degrees or continued education that's offered through NASW-Indiana that's available to us. But sometimes I've attended so many things virtually the past year and a half of things I wouldn't have been able to. Like I attended a national conference on clinical supervision last year. I wouldn't have been able to go to that conference, but that was part of my professional self-care while navigating all the ins and outs of what last year meant for practicum and this year as well. So professional self-care is where you step in to the areas of training that excite you. the areas of training that really wants to, you want to learn something different. I know some people are learning EMDR. EMDR was been around for a long time, but it goes in waves. It's like some things go away and then they come back. And there's brain mapping, and there's other, now, we've got mindfulness training, as I've been mentioning, and it's where you want to put your energy resources in order to grow. There may be some new method or a new technique that you want to integrate or incorporate into your current skills and your current toolbox, but you haven't taken the time to really do that. Now, what I typically hear, because I'm in academics, is that there's not a budget. We don't have a budget. We don't have the money. So I have monies, and I'm able, fortunately, I feel very blessed to be able to do this. I target monies for my own professional self-care. So I'm paying for this certificate, and it's my choice. I didn't have to. It was my choice. And so we make those choices, and we make those opportunities provide for us. So when we think of professional self-care and edifying our skills and enhancing our toolbox, it also then feeds our personal self-care, because we're taking the time to do something we really want to do and enjoy. Now, you can have the in-services that some of your agencies might provide and have guest speakers coming in, still professional self-care. You might read a book that intrigues you. The one that caught my eye recently is called Burnout and Self-Care. We have this on a slide, by the way, later. Burnout and Self-Care. And I'm thinking of using this with my students who are in practicum and adding it, to my curriculum. And I just came across that book recently, even though it's been out for a few years, and it's published by NASW Press. And I also interacted with the author. It is Sarah K. Smullins. And I wrote her a couple of weeks ago and just said, since your book has been out, is there anything else you would want to add? Because I'm going to be speaking to social workers, and I would like to share that. And lo and behold, she actually has a new edition coming out in October where she's added societal burnout. Our professional self-care is also how to manage societal burnout that we've all been exposed to. You don't have to be a social worker to have that. All of the social issues that we've been addressing over the past several years, decades, centuries, but also becoming in the highlight of these past 18 months, we need also to take a look at that. And so, yes, COVID, global burnout. So as we move into, we're going to actually go barrel to the next part, and then we'll do a practice then.
So the one thing I just want to say is, that there's been in the chat some, like, how do I afford it? Those kinds of things. And sometimes it's something as simple as not keeping your email open all the time, right? And so if you're working on reports, say, or updating your notes, right, for after sessions, close your email so that it doesn't pop up and you're not disturbed. You can check it 2 or 3 times during the course of a day. And yes, Molly, not having email alerts on your phone, those things that it doesn't cost any money, but it lets you focus on what you're working on, right? Which means you're more focused, it goes faster. And so those kinds of things, there's already all kinds of things that intrude into our day. Some of the other stuff, Lynn, that you and I talked about was, like taking 5 minutes between clients, right? To write down what you finished with the last client before you go to see the next client, to shut off your brain so you are fully there with your next client. Maybe it means negotiating with your employer about what that might look like, but there are things we can do that don't cost money. So it feels like everything costs money, I know, but I would encourage you to try and think creatively about some of the stuff too. So one of the things we just wanted to touch on was opportunities and some of the challenges around adding self-care to the Code of Ethics. And so, opportunities, again, being able to establish personal and professional self-care best practices. And so being able to do that for yourself and using it as a tool, providing opportunities for your employers and supervisors to support and model self-care. Again, if you're working in an interdisciplinary setting where you may be the only social worker, everybody can get a value out of self-care. And so how do you have that conversation? And again, being able to say, it's now part of the code of ethics that I'm required to follow. And so how can we try and put these pieces in? And it really does open up the door for conversations with your employers who may not be social workers, but also with our peers so that we can help each other be accountable to a plan and help us work on those plans. And so that it's not just solely on my lap and solely mine, but how do we do it together and how do we support each other? I know a number of you've written about having it as part of your supervision where you have goals, and not in the way of like, if you don't hit your goal, you're going to get dinged, but in a way of supporting that work as you go along. And then for challenges, of course, you guys probably could list out 10 more of these than we have listed on the page, but making time, because there are times where it feels like we don't have enough time in a day. But can you get up 10 minutes earlier? Can you do a 15-minute lunch and 15-minute walk? What can you do? How can you fit it in? Helping your employer understand the importance of professional self-care and how it helps you provide better services, right? So if you're a supervisor, taking care of yourself allows you to be there more for your supervisees. It helps you be more present for your clients. And then feeling comfortable. It's really hard. We are a helping profession, right? We're in this because we want to help people. We want to fix problems. And we always put everybody else first, and we usually put ourselves last. So how can we take that as an opportunity and advocate for ourselves? Because when we do that, we actually are advocating for our clients too, because we are there and present and doing our best services for them. Taking time every day. Maybe you don't take time every day. Maybe you just start with what Lynn was saying earlier about 5 out of 7 days. If somebody could get out of bed, that was a good thing. So maybe you hit a goal of 1 day a week, doing a 15-minute something as self-care. And then after you've done that, what do they say? It takes 4 to 6 weeks to start a new habit or stop a bad habit, something like that. I probably got the timing wrong, but anyways, you all know what I'm saying. So trying to get into that habit of, I have a Fitbit, not because I care about how many steps I walk, but because every hour it vibrates to remind me if I haven't gotten up and moved. And so then I remember to move, because if I'm working on something, I can get so caught up in that I don't move for an hour and a half. And then when I do, my body feels like it's about 105. So I try to, what are those things you can do? And then I think maybe the hardest part is, what does self-care mean for me? Right? What is my professional and personal self-care? How can I identify those things and not feel guilty about taking time? Because I know some of you have mentioned that it's really hard sometimes to make the time to take time for ourselves, especially with COVID and people not feeling safe going out sometimes, depending on where you are, all of those things. So we did include resources, and Lynn already mentioned one of them, which actually, Lynn, I read a little bit of it a couple of years ago, and I checked it out of the library the other day, and I started reading it again. So the Burnout and Self-Care. And so thank you for reminding me about that book. Do you want to mention the other ones that you included?
Yes, the Self-Care and Social Work and the A to Z Self-Care Handbook, those are very easy reads. All of these books actually are pretty easy reads. And even if you read them just a little at a time, it's fine. I particularly like the Self-Care and Social Work for practitioners, supervisors, and administrators. And it's taking a look at some ways and suggestions. And some of you have given some great suggestions that you're working with your employers. Because what happens sometimes, and I've been in a supervisory position, managing a team, several teams actually, and that's a sandwich position. You've got the owners of the company coming down like this, you've got your staff coming up like this. So middle management is not always a fun place to be, but it also is a wonderful place to be if you're the skill sets for that. And I found that communication is key, absolutely. And so these resources will give you some ideas I know that some people are putting some other suggestions in the chat, so make sure you're reading the chat as we go along.
So just a quick reminder, you can find the new updated Code of Ethics. There is, you can read all about it. There are handouts in the tile for this, our presentation, as well as a couple other documents that we put together from National around like the changes that happened. Those are in that file as well as in the resources tab. And if you'd like to purchase Code of Ethics, you don't have to purchase them from us. You can purchase them from NASW Press directly, or you can go to our website and order them. So that is all that we had. And so now what we are going to do is stop sharing screens, and we have about 15 minutes. So actually like 17 minutes. Which means we're pretty much on track, Lynn, which is kind of amazing for us. I was like last 20 minutes Q&A and discussion. So this is your opportunity. You guys have questions. If there's something we haven't answered that we missed, Katie, there are questions that in the chat, or in either in the chat or in Q&A box. We'd be happy to answer them. And
we did have one, and I got to scroll a bit because there's been amazing comments throughout the chat. So I so appreciate everyone for contributing. It's right up here from Don McDonald. What are some tangible ways employers can implement or encourage self-care?
Can we take that one first?
yeah, go for it.
Okay. So whenever I've worked with agencies in the past, typically what we have to first do is assess what is self-care and what is the definition that an employer is attaching to those words. And then once we determine what their definition is, then we can trickle it down to the staff. Now, interestingly, I've had the experience where employers are like, that's just on the employees. They don't, they need to take care of themselves. They're here to work. I'm not here to take care of them, hold their hands. I go, that's not the point. So we have, as a profession, an obligation. I think that this is an and conversation. It goes back to it's personal self-care and professional self-care. So specifically, some ways is to start the conversations if you haven't had them already. And there's been some good ideas in the chat from others whose employers are implementing the personal development goal plan, making it a part of staff development, and they get a prize if they hit their personal marks. I know that at the university, our wellness program continued through the pandemic online, and they had virtual prizes and virtual things that you could do. We last summer, we had a hydration challenge just to stay hydrated. Okay, I would. Okay, but we had a hydration challenge to increase your water intake. Just think about, what do you want? So as typical, if we raise a concern or an issue, do you have a suggestion to go along with it? So that when you go into your administration or into your staff meetings, and this can become a conversation, and put it on the agenda and ask, can we have a conversation about professional self-care? And I'm responsible for my personal self-care, but what about professional self-care? Because one of the things that I find intriguing is that is that we'll have these conversations, and then things will just fall still on the individual. So in order for it to be at the macro level, we have to engage in that communication process to allow for people to feel comfortable coming forth with their ideas. Whether, some people think, okay, self-care is a list. In my mind, self-care is a mindset. As we've said, some of you have said process, but self-care at the employer level is to look at your employees and ask yourself, what could we do? And what have we learned over the 18 months that maybe we can continue because it worked? Do we really have to document some things the way we've been doing it and take up the next 10 minutes? Or have we learned how to modify and make things do things differently? So we can't answer a specific company, but generally speaking, it goes back to that strategic planning, assessing what's going on. The same competencies that we use on a micro level is used at the macro level. And it starts with, this is important. This is important. So as some of you are making suggestions and all, we want you and encourage you to have these conversations with your employers. Now, I have certainly been someone who's gone beating on the doors and saying, why can't we do it this way? Or how about we try this? And can we just modify this? And I get shut down, you know, or things don't go my way. And so then I have to walk away from that. So let me give you the 4 principles that I work by. I show up, pay attention. I tell my truth, and I let go of the outcome. Because then I can just take care of my response and reactions and me. So I hope that's helpful. And just there might be some specific resources that people are also implementing here on chat. So using the idea that self-care is not just 2 words put together with a hyphen, it is a mindset. And then you create the climate in your agencies where it's important. And you'll find just by energetically this happens, that people will respond. Now, suppose you're someone that you don't like escape rooms. I don't. You don't like, I did one, I said, no. You know, you don't like to breathe. Okay, you don't like, or at least in front of people, you don't want to play a tambourine and shake it up. You know, maybe your idea of self-care is just to quietly go about your work, get done, go home, take care of yourself. Yay! There's nothing absolutely wrong with that. Your employer can create the climate that you can do that because you're doing what makes sense for you. But sometimes corporately engaging in activities can build community, can build engagement, can help us to have that relationships development, which is also a part of professional self-care, so that we can have conversations when they become difficult. So I really hope that you'll take a look at the self-care as a mindset and creating the climate in your culture for it to happen.
And I think it's, I think your point as well with your 4 points of, you know, we can show up, we can have the discussions, we can show them the information. And then if an employer decides that it's not important to them, that is their decision. And then how can we come back? How do we advocate? Can we take that? Like, we have to process that then. And, you know, sometimes the question is this really the right place for me? And I'm not saying that any of you should quit your jobs. Please do not. That's not what I'm saying. But to have that conversation with yourself about what do you need to do, and then respectfully having that conversation with an employer about, you know, I understand that you don't think that self-care is important, but it's important for me to be able to provide my best services and to be a productive employee, and to feel fully appreciated as who I am. And so how can I do that? You know, would you be willing to allow me to have, so if they require you to have 50-minute sessions and back to back with only 10 minutes, can you do that for a couple of hours and then get a 15-minute break and then do it for a couple more, you know, like how could you work in something that would work for you so that you can be effective, and bringing it back to being able to provide the best services to the clients, and also recognizing, I think, that that sometimes it's not going to work no matter what you do, and that's okay. You try again. Before we jump into anything else, I just want to say to you all that if you, where you're typing in your chats, there's 3 dots on the very right side of that. You can actually click on that and you can save the chat. If you would like to save the chat with all of the comments and the recommendations, you can easily save the chat from everything that was talked about this afternoon. So if you weren't able to write down something or miss something, you can do that. So just so that you all know, I just wanted to put that out there. There is a question about why do you think people feel guilty about doing self-care? Sorry, Katie, I just stole your.
No worries.
I think part of that is just the societal feeling that we're supposed to be always productive. And that's about what do we show the world that we've accomplished during the day, as opposed to also taking care of ourselves as part of that accomplishment. Lynn, do you have other?
Well, I think that, that's a packed question. Thank you, William. But it's because some of it is personality construct and, how we view ourselves and view who we are in the world. Guilt is one of those things that we impose. So it's a response to. I think that sometimes, at least I'll speak from my own personal experience, and this was kind of mentioned in Francine's session, we don't want to be perceived as not being a team player. We don't want to be perceived as incompetent, that we, if I go and say, I'm out of here and everybody else is staying, that we are the one that's bailing and we're not a team player. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into where the guilt might originate. And I think that if we can counter that with, if that self-talk comes up with, if I leave, what will people think? That gets back into the judgment that we talked about earlier, and remind ourselves that this is a moment that I need to do this. For me to take a sabbatical meant the faculty team had to take on my job. And so the idea then is that when they go on sabbatical, I will take over, for them, if they choose. Not everybody goes on a sabbatical, by the way. And so a part of me was like, gosh, they're going to go on overloads, or they're going to have to do this, or my program director is going to have to do this. And I had to let go of that because they approved it and they could have said no. Sometimes faculty get turned down, and finding ways to alleviate the guilt simply by saying, this is what I need to do for now. Rather than fall into the chatter that is taking place in the head. So there's a couple of things too that before we end, I'll do another practice that might help with this too.
So a couple of you said that you can't find the 3 dots. So we will save the chat and then we'll work with Matchbox to get it loaded up onto the tile for this session. It'll probably, I can guarantee it won't happen today, and it won't probably happen tomorrow because it's Jill and I were taking a self-care day tomorrow. But we will do our best to get it up there by the end of the week, so you have that as a resource.
I know there was a very quick question for Lynn to repeat the 4 principles that you mentioned. Sure.
So that is to show up, pay attention, tell your truth, let go of the outcome. I actually have a workshop I'm now doing around those 4 principles, and it's called 4 mindful practices for a playful life, so that we can just, do that drop-in moment.
I love that. And speaking of drop-in moments, Amanda Fisher said, I do better hearing short meditation or things that pause, drop in, and breathe. Do you have any resources for that specifically?
John Kabat-Zinn is well known for bringing MBSR to the United States, and he has several YouTube videos available as well as books, and he's the one that he's doing a conversation with Oprah on one of his YouTube videos, and he talks about this specifically. So if you go to YouTube, type in John Kabat-Zinn, it's JONKABOTZINN. I'll put that in the chat. Another resource, someone else had asked for resources, is, understandably with something like this, it's a lot of resources. So the website that I like a lot is mindful.org, which is another way to gather information. They also have a magazine. They offer classes on your Calm app, one of you referenced earlier, and Insight Timer app, I should say that more specifically. Insight Timer app. They also offer classes, and But I would start with mindful.org if you have absolutely, no information at all. John Kabat-Zinn's work is also great. And looking at some of the publications from Shambhala Publications has some really wonderful resources on mindfulness. There's also PESI offers continuing education around mindfulness and psychotherapy. I did the one on mindfulness and addictions, I think I did. And some of those are 2 and 3 day certification programs. They're not certifications, they're certificates. So
I would also encourage you all. A couple of years ago, I wanted to work on my meditation practice, which I will be the first to admit has fallen away in the last couple of months. I think because I've been spending more time outside playing in my yard, which is meditation for me. But there are all kinds of resources at the public library that don't cost any money. So you can check out books, you can try different things. There's all kinds of YouTube apps and recordings and things like that that you can access at no cost to just try and see if you like them. Find one of the walking meditations, those kinds of things to just try and see. The only thing I encourage you and please ask you all to do is please do not do them while you're driving in your car. Please do not.
However, you can do mindful driving.
Yes. So
you can do mindful driving.
Lynn, we have 4 minutes left. This always goes faster than we think it will. I know we had one more activity. Do we have enough time?
Yeah, we're going to do this real quickly. This is something that you can do anytime, especially if you are working with a client or a family that you find yourself having a visceral reaction to, and you're having to put on your professional face, but inside you're going, okay, be honest. We all know what that feels like. Or you're in a budget meeting or another meeting. So this is the kindness meditation. One of the things we kind of tapped on was compassion, but self-compassion or inner compassion. And so this is a very easy to do. And what we're going to do is that I'm going to ask you to breathe in kindness for yourself and exhale kindness towards the client. So I didn't have a client when I was doing this practice last week, but I have a family member that I was having some visceral reactions to. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to think about my client, my family member. So if you'd like to join me now, you may close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or do a nice soft gaze in front of you. Just look away from the computer screen and find a focal point in front of you, preferably about 6 to 8 to 10 feet in front of you. And I want you to breathe in kindness on your inhale for yourself. Ready? Inhale kindness. Hold. And exhale kindness for whomever you're thinking about. Inhale kindness for yourself. Exhale kindness towards the person you're thinking about. One more time, inhale kindness for yourself. And exhale kindness for the person you're thinking about. Now, if you're in a session, you're in a case meeting, you're in a family meeting, you're in a board meeting, you can do this without closing your eyes. And you can simply remind yourself, breathe in kindness, exhale kindness, and see what happens. I want to thank everybody for your wonderful responses and engaging with us today.
Yes, it is truly. You all, you make this work really well. Lynn and I have fun doing these things, but it's nice to see for all of you to participate and share in the chat. I know sometimes it feels weird to do it, but we really do appreciate that. And we appreciate you all joining us for the conference. Lynn, I know I say this to you a lot, but thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all of us. I always learn something new when I'm with you and we do these. And it makes me think and remember why, what we need to do. So I appreciate that. Katie,
Yeah.
go ahead and close us out.
Well,
Thank you
just keep
both.
swimming, everybody. Just keep swimming.
I love that so much. I feel so uplifted and so much better about many things after just taking time and absorbing everything you all had to offer today. So thank you so much, Lynn and Beryl, for sharing your expertise. And I think really just probably turning around a whole day or week or a few months for a lot of people and who are participating today. So thank you both. For everyone who's joining us, please make sure you complete your session evaluation by the close of business day on October 3rd. And session evaluations are available from the resource tab on the main conference page. And as a reminder, complete the overall conference evaluation, and that link will be sent to you on Wednesday. And once again, thank you so much for attending the conference and this session. And please join us for our closing remarks starting right now.
We'll see y'all in the other room in a minute or two. Thanks for joining us. Thanks,
Thanks
Katie.
so much, all.
Thanks, Katie.
Nina, you can go ahead and shut us off.